Hello and welcome to the December 19th edition of the Gold, Goats, and Guns Short News. My name is Tom Luongo. We've got a lot to talk about today. And the reason we have a lot to talk about today is not because the Federal Reserve's about to most likely raise interest rates in about an hour. I'm doing this at about 1 o'clock. It's because Donald Trump, a couple of hours ago, just announced that we will be pulling out of Syria. Now, just yesterday, I was on here complaining that the guy couldn't make good on any of his threats, that he didn't have the chops to actually do politics, that he'd make threats and then back down. He did this over the border wall and the funding of the border wall and the government shutdown, which he, publicly went after Chuck Schumer about in that ambush that he pulled on them in the White House done a week ago. He's folded on so many other issues as well. So I'm saying over the last 6 months. So I'm really skeptical about this announcement because he did this on the eve of the Helsinki summit back in July and then was lambasted and called a traitor and everything else. And the entire Washington establishment went to overdrive about how Donald Trump is a vile and disgusting human being. And then since then, he's been the ever decreasing, ever shrinking Donald Trump. So now I've got Trump doing what I told him to do a year and a half ago, declare victory and leave. ISIS has been demolished. 99% of the work that was done to destroy ISIS was done by the Russians and the Syrians, not by the Americans. The American government, the Americans have been harboring elements of ISIS, allowing them to leave, like Raqqa, for example, and Deir ez-Zor, as well as trying to provide both political and military cover for all the al-Qaeda-linked factions in Syria that have been opposing the Assad government. The goal has always been balkanization of Syria, a permanent U.S. presence there, which controls the oil fields and therefore controls most of the Syrian government's revenue, in order to try and eventually get what they want, which is regime change in Syria. Now, Trump has called kind of bullshit on all this from the beginning, but he's been very, very inconsistent about it because his generals and the Joint Chiefs of Staff have been adamantly opposed to a pullout of anywhere. As a matter of fact, they want more money, and Dunford, who was just announced by, or was just leaked by Trump 10 days ago that he's going to be out as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Remember that Dunford was an Obama appointee that Trump reappointed last year. Dunford was talking not a week ago about how we need 40,000 troops in the region in order to pacify everything, which is patently insane. Just patently insane. And now you got to ask yourself is whether or not all of that is just posturing in order to try and get a bigger military budget. I don't care at this point. I'm done caring about the little bits of machinations and all the Machiavellian point counterpoint stuff that's going on. Trump was not elected to play that game. Trump was elected to bring the troops home in Syria and dismantle the freaking empire overseas, because only when you dismantle the empire overseas can you drain the damn swamp in D.C. Because the swamp in D.C. is fueled by the empire overseas. So, looking at this, we got a best case, worst case scenario in front of us. Best case is that Trump is finally asserting his control as president over his generals. His generals have been telling him for 2 years, no, you can't pull out. No, you can't pull out. Bob Woodward's book went over this. And whether you believe, Woodward is anything other than a paid shill or not, the data has fit the facts. His data has fit those reports quite accurately, that Trump would sit there with his arms folded and say, you guys just want me to stay here indefinitely so you can spend all of our freaking money. And the generals keep telling him, no, we need to keep pressure on. We need to maintain all of our bases overseas. Now, kid yourself, Donald Trump's no non-interventionist, but his instincts are political instincts, and his instincts fundamentally are correct, which is that the empire's draining us overseas, so it needs to be taken out. So now the question is, after he's done all of this stuff to literally rebuild a Bushian foreign policy, now all of a sudden he comes out of nowhere and says, we're pulling out of Syria. Like, does anybody believe this guy at this point? Yeah, we're going to shut down the government and blame Schumer for it. Yeah, does anybody believe him at this point? I mean, I have to ask these questions, not because I don't want this to occur. but because I've been burned by this guy already enough times to wonder what the truth is. So the best case is that for some reason Trump feels secure enough now that he can actually do this. Or he feels weak enough that he can feel his base slipping away from him on all other issues. And this is his Hail Mary. And the worst case scenario is that he is doing all of these things, and now they're going to accelerate the timetable to try and remove him from office before he can actually make any substantive change to foreign policy. So that's what I think is going on here. Okay, those are the two worst case. Those are the two scenarios: best case, worst case. When you read the tea leaves as to what's been happening, I've got an article over at Strategic Culture. I'll put a link to it in the description of the video down below, discussing how Turkey and Russia have set the stage for the end of the Syrian conflict. I wrote this literally on like Monday afternoon, and it's been published this morning. Because they, independent of the United States, and I've been saying for months now that the United States policy in Syria is irrelevant. It's just frustrating to watch the Trump administration, John Bolton and Mike Pompeo and all these frickin' neocon dimwits go through the motions of trying to hold on to the last vestiges of their idiotic frickin' great powers policy. It's insane. It's stupid. It's moronic. It's counterproductive. And it's anti-American. Worse, it's anti-Israeli. I mean, on top of everything else, it's anti-Israeli, which is the whole point of doing this, which is to stabilize Israel. It's otherworldly. I don't understand it. But understand this: the Turks and the Russians and the Iranians and China have been just basically running the table. Syrian government opened up talks with the Kurds to break their alliance with the Americans. The Kurds are never smart enough to take a good offer when it's handed to them. The Iraqi elections have handed the Americans a massive defeat politically, meaning it makes it even harder for us to maintain our position in Iraq, to put pressure on Iran. Understand that we have 5,200 troops in Iraq. We've got somewhere north of the 2,000 we say there are in Syria. We've got how many in Afghanistan? All those people are ringing Iran. Let's not mince words here. We know what John Bolton wants. We know what Bibi Netanyahu wants. We know what Mike Pompeo wants. We know what Sheldon Adelson wants. We are not sure what Donald Trump wants. And we know damn well what the Joint Chiefs of Staff want. So, since the shoot down of the IL-20 Russian reconnaissance plane and Bather Khashoggi, it's been very obvious that those are two major incidents that have changed the calculus. That those were two incidents that began the process of ending this kind of stalemate that we've had in Syria for well over a year now. Because Syria, for the most part, has been settled history up to this point. And now it's finally in a metastable state. And now it's finally having to move forward. Because as I asserted right after it happened, I fully believe that the Russians had to blame the Israelis for the IL-20 shootdown, which was actually a British and French intelligence operation to get NATO involved in Syria by goading the Russians into retaliating against the French frigate, which actually blew up their plane. And then we have a shooting war in NATO between NATO and the Russians in Syria. So the only rational course of action for Putin was to blame Israel, who was a party to all this, because the Israeli fighters ran cover for all this stuff. And then shut down negotiations with Israel completely. Putin apparently hasn't spoken to Netanyahu in months, even though Netanyahu calls him every other day, like the little bitch that he is. And then moved S-300s in there with Russian crews so that the Israelis can't shoot at any of the Russian anti-aircraft and electronic warfare installations, because they're all Russian troops. And if the Israelis do that, they will get nuked by the Russians. And that will be that, and they will be justified. So Putin's played this beautifully. At the same time, Erdogan has played the Americans perfectly, the American deep state versus Donald Trump bifurcation perfectly, by drip feeding out all the the details of the Jamal Khashoggi killing. Because the deep state, on the one hand, wants Mohammed bin Salman, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, out of the way. Trump has pledged his entire foreign policy plan on MBS reforming Saudi Arabia and forming an alliance with Israel. And so Erdogan's getting concessions from everybody. So he's going to be able to freely move troops into northern Iraq to pressure the Kurds. Meanwhile, if the Americans don't pull their support for the Kurds out of eastern Syria, east of the Euphrates River, which is exactly what this is all about. At the same time, Turks have a free hand to do everything else they want. Contract with the Russians to continue publicly throwing it in the Americans' face that they're building a major natural gas pipeline into Europe, which has Trump apoplectic over because it undermines his energy dominance policy. I mean, this is all really, really good, right? So I watched this play out and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I could see all these bits and pieces moving into place anyway, and everything was just going to happen without the Americans' involvement. The Astana peace process has gone forward to the point where now they're talking details of the political process of what's going to happen in Syria after all the quote-unquote fighting is done. Iran, this morning, I saw on RT this morning, Iran has agreed to pull back to the 100-kilometer line, all of their advisors and any special forces they may have there, to pull them 100 kilometers back from Israel. This is a deal that Netanyahu was given 3 months ago and flatly turned down because he wanted all Iranian troops out of all of Syria because he's an idiot. S-300s control the skies. Makings of a deal are happening here. I don't know what deal's on the table, but it's possible. And if Trump pulls this off, it'll be great. And I'll give him mad props for it. But pulling us out of Syria, I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when Putin confirms it. I'll believe it when Assad says something about it. Meanwhile, and I'll leave you with this, meanwhile, the neoconservative wing of the Republican Party and the Washington establishment mouthed its words through Mr. Lindsey Graham, lighting the loafers Lindsey. If these media reports are true, it will be an Obama-like mistake made by the Trump administration, he said in a statement. While American patience in confronting radical Islam may wane, the radical Islamist passion to kill Americans and our allies never wavers. An American withdrawal at this point in time would be a big win for ISIS, Iran, Bashar al-Assad of Syria, and Russia. I fear it will lead to devastating consequences for our nation, the region, and throughout the world. Unquote. A truer picture of mendacity, evil, and idiocy I haven't seen in quite a while. This has been the Gold Ghost and Guns short news for Wednesday, December 19th, 2018. If you like what you heard today, please give a like and subscribe down below. That'd be fantastic. Live streams happen on Monday nights at 8 and Friday nights at 8:30 here on YouTube and are cross-posted to Periscope as well. You can follow my work over at my blog at tomluongo.me, as well as follow me on Twitter at TFL1728, and you can support my work over at Patreon/Gold Goats and Guns for now until a better solution comes to be. This has been quite a Wednesday. You guys take care. We'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.